This is Beyond a Reasonable Doubt with your hosts, Mark Garrigus and Gary Smith.
Hey, welcome, Gary, to the Altar Bard on a Sunday morning, a little earlier than usual, right? You got things planned today?
Yes, thank you very much. I've got a family engagement very early this morning, earlier than I expected. So Mark was kind enough to flex for me, and we went a little earlier. So thank you very much.
I love it. Well, we have quite a few things that we can talk about. I think everybody is talking about, at least in my corner of the world, the Trump indictment in federal court on the classified documents case brought by the special counsel, Jack Smith. And I think there's 37 roughly counts. And the talk has been, in fact, I was stopped 3 or 4 times yesterday by people asking the same question. What is the effect of Judge Eileen Cannon getting assigned this case? You heard any of the chatter on that?
I have. I've heard a lot, and I saw an article actually that came out late last night or early this morning. A clerk for that court saying that she would probably remain. I'm not sure if I agree with that, but that's certainly been making headlines. Yeah,
there's been speculation that she might recuse herself, or that the DOJ might bring a motion to recuse her based on the fact that she was reversed the first time around when she had appointed a special master, and she was reversed by the 11th Circuit. I guess I will make a prediction. I don't think that's going to happen. I think it's unlikely. Most judges are usually resist the idea of removing themselves from a case in that kind of a situation because they've been reversed prior. In fact, you might remember we discussed in Florida, there was the situation where I believe DeSantis had wanted a judge to recuse himself. The judge did not. And then the judge subsequently recused himself because a close relative owned 30 shares of Disney stock. So sometimes you don't see, and I don't know that anybody saw that coming. So the recusal on the basis of being reversed by the 11th Circuit, I don't think is likely.
Yeah, it doesn't seem likely to me either. I mean, you alluded to that Disney case, I believe, that was, under $5,000 if you play out the current stock price. And, that was a surprise. But in this case, I don't think that's going to happen. So what do you think that may mean for, for Trump? It's the indictment, by the way, is, almost 50 pages, and I've read it. It's certainly interesting. There's things in there that were confusing to me, and there's things in there that were very plain.
Well, so this is what I make of it. She being Her Honor, has already, in the previous case where she was reversed, made some decisions because she understands that, everybody always talks about no one's above the law, but you have a situation where he was the former president. The records were presumably from the time period when he was president. There is going to be much ado made out of the Presidential Records Act. There's going to be much ado made out of the fact that these records were not, even though they're classified, they're going to make an argument, or the defense will make an argument, that since he's the person presumably who's at the apex and all of these classified documents would flow to him or could flow to him, that would be enough for him to have a kind of a pass or a defense to this. You're also, I'm sure, going to see the argument that there is a selective prosecution. And selective prosecution is going to be because not only did Trump have classified documents, Pence had classified documents, Biden had classified documents. They'll point to presidents and vice presidents who've had them previously. And that is going to be something dwelling on the Presidential Records Act that they're going to be getting into, I would say, in motion practice. I think the other thing that I can predict is right now, as we sit here in June of 2023, you're a year out from when traditionally the presidential election heats up, sometime after Memorial Day,
sure,
before the November election. I think it's highly, highly unlikely that we get to a situation where this case is tried to a jury prior to the presidential election.
Interesting. So he also has a court date coming up for the New York indictment. Is that correct?
Correct. And the same day that he revealed that he had been indicted, his two lawyers resigned. And then it appears that, and we'll know for sure on Tuesday when they enter an appearance with the ex-president. You never want to speculate as to what the lawyer situation is. But if everything that's being reported is accurate, Todd Blanche, who is in the New York case, this New York State case out of Manhattan, is presumably going to enter an appearance in the Florida federal case.
And what do you expect for Tuesday when it's reported that Trump has been ordered to appear in Miami? Do you think there's going to be anything of any surprise in that appearance?
No, it's a pretty standard appearance. I'm doing a arraignment in federal court can be fairly quick, and I would expect that they're not going to showboat about that. And also being in federal court, unlike in the state court where you could have cameras and video, I doubt that there's going to be video in the courtroom. So we'll resurrect the court sketch artists of old for the pictures, if you will, in the courtroom. The other point is that the difference between the criminal and the civil is what are called interlocutory appeals. So whereas you in a civil case, and Trump is past history, you would predict that issues that arise during the course of this prosecution are not going to be going up and down to the 11th Circuit necessarily with the same frequency that you might have in a non-criminal case. So this thing should basically play out in Judge Cannon's courtroom for the most part. And, judges and your pick of the judge is important in a criminal case. Evidentiary rulings, the idea of the what they will and will not allow in to court, the kinds of defenses that will be allowed, makes, and the fact that it's in Florida is another kind of interesting point. They could have brought this case, I suppose, in D.C. And the speculation is that the special counsel wanted to avoid a fight over the venue because that could have taken quite a bit of time if they had fought over that. And Florida, I think, given the law, is the more appropriate place if you're going to bring this case to have brought it.
You and I haven't discussed this previously, but I'm interested in your analysis on it. Having read the indictment, it seems damning in terms of the evidence that they claim to have. There seems to be video evidence. There seems to be quite a bit of bad testimony from people involved, including not only Trump but also his body man Walt Nauta, I believe. His
co-defendant.
Right, who's his co-defendant. And there is alleged to be an audio recording where Trump, apparently said some things that could be very damning. What is your thought or analysis based on the venue that this was brought in. And, if this alleged evidence is all to be true, what do you think? How do you see this playing out?
Well, one of the interesting things, if you read the indictment, is that a lot of it comes from presumably his own lawyers.
Right.
And, even to the point where something that I thought you could never get at, even in a crime fraud exception, was the just pure work product, in the sense that not his words necessarily, but his deeds. And if you read through it, you'll see they made a plucking motion, things of that nature, right?
Yeah.
I have a lot of problems with a lot of that, and I'll tell you why. Clients come to lawyers, especially criminal defense lawyers, because they're looking for advice. A lot of times clients make ill-advised statements to the lawyers. The lawyer, the duty is to tell the client, no, you can't do that, or no, that's not appropriate. And the whole idea of the attorney-client privilege is to allow a free, open dialogue. If you're going to get to the point where somebody goes to the lawyer, the criminal defense lawyer, and has to start worrying about what they say, the lawyer could end up testifying against them. That's a very, very difficult situation, and I'm not sure well advised on a policy level. Clients, when they are facing criminal cases, Trump even said it himself. Nobody wants to be indicted. I went my whole life without being indicted. Now I've been indicted twice in 2 months. It's a horrific thing to have happen to you. And the idea that he's been or he was in the crosshairs and is asking his lawyers questions, the lawyer's response presumably is, no, you can't do that. No, we have to do that. And he's exploring, presumably in these, if you believe what's written in there, how to comply with a subpoena. Well, that's why you're in the lawyer's office. Why is that allowed in, or why is a lawyer ordered? And they clearly were here, but I still have a real problem with it, that is a piercing of the attorney-client privilege and is way too expansive and does irreparable damage to the attorney-client privilege.
Yeah, it was interesting how much was in that indictment about, testimony, I guess, for lack of a better term, or interviews from his attorney. I mean, there is quite a bit in there. We referenced the plucking thing, but there's more than just that. It's clear that he was ordered to give his testimony, I suppose, if that's the right term. But yeah, it's certainly damning. But given that there's also apparently a trove of video evidence that goes along with it, it's going to be really interesting to see how that actually plays out and how it helps or hurts the case.
Well, by putting in his body man as a co-defendant, I'm assuming that they expect he will flip, or that they will try to get him to flip,
yeah,
and testify against Trump to get out of harm's way. I think that there probably will be a motion to sever brought by him. He will say, hey, I should not be tried with the president. I may or I may not testify, or I may testify if I'm not with him. I don't want some of the stuff against him to be in the same trial as against me, because it's irrelevant and may prejudice me, especially much of the things about what Trump's attorney said. So I would expect to see either a severance or a cooperation by this gentleman.
Given the way that the indictment reads, do you think that would be a successful endeavor? It sure seems like there was, at least the way the government paints it, that there was a lot of interaction between the two of them.
It's one of the things that will be front and center in front of this judge. It'll be interesting to see if they bring it, how she grants, or whether she grants it.
Mark, it's up to you. Is there anything else you want to touch on? I mean, we've left 6 things on my list that we haven't touched on today. It's been a frenetic few days here in the legal news world.
Yeah, there was. We have a video, don't we? That or a couple of videos.
I have several. So, guide me.
Why don't we tee up the next one?
Which one's top of mind for you? Because
I think Glendale. I mean, I've been asked repeatedly about this. So
me too. Let's check it out.
Hi, my name is Adina.
Yes, and I called your name, yes?
Yes.
Yes, go for it.
Yes, I'm a teacher in the district. I also teach in LUSD. I have 2 students in the district. I did intervention at Fremont, but I'm also a community member who volunteers extensively in Watts and South LA, and I work at the Children's Hospital Los Angeles with queer and trans youth in large groups. And so I deal with a lot of their trauma related to the heteronormative, Judeo-Christian, patriarchal, imperialist, capitalist system that oppresses them. And so, why critical race theory? I'm not just here in support of our LGBTQ youth, it's all connected. I'm in support of critical race theory and diversity, inclusion, equity training, because white people participated, for example, in the largest social welfare program in the history of the United States, and yet now they throw their hands up in the air when we look at our housing crisis. And Armenians talk about the genocide, but they received SSI, but they don't want to talk about the indigenous genocide of 1850 and the lack of preparations for black and indigenous people in this country. And they don't want to talk about how dare you as marginalized people come here, and you don't want to talk about the oppressed trans youth who, your kids aren't even learning what they need to learn in this. That 1 in 2 will attempt suicide, and 95% know that they are trans when they are 3, 4, and 5 years old.
I believe that, what was for context, that was at the Glendale board meeting.
School board, yeah.
School board meeting, and she apparently self-identifies as a teacher. And that little diatribe of hers kind of hit on every cultural talking point that you would want to see. And it talks about diversity and inclusion at the same time as slamming Armenians for talking about the genocide, but not talking about indigenous genocide, which is like, what? What are you talking about? The LA is home to not 1 but 2 genocide centers that specifically talk about both, amongst several, including the Armenian, Rwanda, the indigenous. So I just don't even know where to begin. But that apparently caught the attention of quite a few people.
Yeah, rightfully so. I mean, you come at it from your point of view. I come at it as a father of a 3, soon to be 4-year-old. And I 95% by the time they're 3, 4, or 5, I don't know. I'm maybe, but certainly not from what I've observed with my son and his friends. But God, it's just, yeah, I watched that video 5 or 6 times and just found myself scratching my head as I walked away each and every time.
Yeah, and there's been quite a firestorm in Glendale and also North Hollywood as well over these issues, and it's been characterized as Armenian.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people just demeaning the Armenian community and saying that there's nut jobs. I wholesale. Maybe it's my friendship with you. Maybe it's just the time I spent, the decade I spent in the Glendale area interacting with the business owners and citizens that are of Armenian descent. But I stand for none of it. The idea that this is radicalized Armenians is just not something that I can accept.
I'm not buying into it either. It's almost, you have to watch it and you smile at just how it's almost a parody. We have another video, I think.
Yes, the absurdity is humorous. If anything, it has to be humorous. Otherwise, it's just demoralizing. Because
I don't disagree. The maybe to end on this Josh Hawley, do you have that video of him with the judicial nominee? Thought this was an interesting exchange. This is where we've come to in America, June 7th. So it's within the last 96 or so hours.
Yeah, let's check it out.
And do you think my time's almost expired, and I know other senators want to ask questions, so let me just very quickly here. Do you think it's wrong to discriminate on the basis of religious faith?
Absolutely, Senator.
Why did you argue that religious services, religious people pose a greater risk of infection than people gathered to argue for defunding the police?
I was representing my client. The mayor and consulting epidemiologists had issued orders that she thought were going to protect public health. It was my role to defend those as
why did you make that argument? That seems like a strange argument to me, that religious people are somehow, more infectious than folks who have other ideological positions? I don't get it.
My understanding was the nature of singing and other things epidemiologists thought could transmit COVID at a higher rate.
You didn't put any scientific evidence on the record for it?
Senator, those were fast-moving cases, and they weren't going to full briefing and full summary judgment with a record.
That's not what the district court said. The district court said that you engaged in, and your client engaged in, and you defended discrimination on the basis of religious belief, that you offered no scientific evidence for it, that you pressed these arguments over and over and over without any foundation. Frankly, I'm disappointed that you made those arguments. You can choose what arguments to make. I'm disappointed you made those arguments. I'm disappointed you persisted in defending them here today. And for that reason, among others, I will not support your nomination. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Tillis.
It's interesting. I think it's a fair criticism to cite the distinction, because a lot of people had a real problem with the idea that you couldn't congregate for the purposes of religion, but you could congregate for protest.
Right.
But I think it's an unfair criticism. And mind you, this is coming from somebody who was making the opposite argument in a lot of these cases in real time. I think it's unfortunate that you're telling the lawyer or that they can't make an argument for their client. And once again, I think that's a bridge too far and a little showboating by Hawley.
Yeah, it certainly is. And it's, if you watch carefully, she's clearly a little miffed that he is pushing her to answer for a position that was not necessarily her own. I mean, she was a lawyer. She was advocating for a client, and she is frustratedly, trying to signal that it doesn't really work. The video, at least if you lean to the right, is certainly a win for Hawley, but it's clearly frustrating for her.
Yeah. I thought it was an interesting exchange. You can sometimes, I think, make a good point, but then take it too far, and that's, I think, what was done there. I think he could have or should have, with somebody, said, "Okay, you made that argument, but in retrospect, do you think that argument, based on what the district court said then and what we've known since, is an argument that did not stand the test of time?" Basically, you have one more video, I think, Gary, don't you?
We have a couple more. Which one are you thinking of? We've got one from our former vice president.
Yeah, why don't we take a look at that? We'll wrap up with that.
Sure.
And the Brooklyn
I think now more than ever, we ought to be finding ways we could actually come together.
Sir, we're going to get
and
to
this kind of action by the Department of Justice, I think, would only fuel further division in the country. And let me also say, I think it would also send a terrible message to the wider world. I mean, we're the emblem of democracy. We're the symbol of justice in the world. And the serious matter, which has already happened once in New York, of indicting a former president of the United States, sends a terrible message to the world. I hope the DOJ thinks better of it and resolves these issues without an indictment.
Sir, I just want to clarify. What you're saying is that if they believe he committed a crime, they should not go forward with an indictment. You just talked before about committing to the rule of law.
Let me be clear that no one's above the law.
Okay.
But with regard to the unique circumstances here, Look, I had no business having classified documents in my residence, and I took full responsibility for it. President Biden had no business having them in his residence from when he was vice president as well. And the same with former President Trump. But I would just hope that there would be a way for them to move forward without the dramatic and drastic and divisive step of indicting a former president of the United States. We've got to find a way to move our country forward and restore confidence in equal treatment under the law in this country. We really do.
Sir, if
I leave it there just because there's an interesting legal position, I think, that's fueled by the politics.
Yeah, certainly. It's it was a fun gotcha moment for CNN there, but yeah, it's his point is not necessarily wholly, without merit. Yeah.
I'm there, Gary. Thank you for spending some time with me this morning. As always, it was great. Everybody who's either watching or listening, thank you for joining us.
Absolutely, Mark. Thank you so much for giving us some of your time this morning as well. And I will echo your sentiment. Thank you, everyone who is listening, for supporting us and continuing to subscribe and listen. You can check us out on YouTube, youtube.com/Reasonable Doubt Podcast, and we will see you all next time.
Thanks for listening to Reasonable Doubt. Subscribe on YouTube at youtube.com/Reasonable Doubt Podcast.